It's a case of imprisonment and revenge that has shocked the whole of Canada. This man held his enemy captive for 7 days and tortured him. He hit him with a hammer. His leg bones shattered. The pain caused him to howl in agony. The second blow shattered his skull. This man had his enemy by his neck so that he would lose his balance. The contact with the ground would cause him excruciating pain. Then the avenger listened in silence in the other room. The howls of agony brought him pleasure to face the demon that had violated and murdered his daughter. It wasn't enough for him. The hero, Mel, is a highly skilled doctor. He and his wife were very close. They raised a beautiful daughter. They were a happy family, but due to his busy schedule, he doesn't come home often. When he had a moment to spare, his wife would pester him. She dragged him to the bedroom. After a brief moment of coitus, his wife went out. Soon the doorbell rang and his daughter's classmates came to ask why she wasn't at school, and his daughter had never been like this before. So Mel felt bad and went to the police to report it. After a day and a night of searching with the police, they found the body in a small wooded area. His daughter had been raped and murdered and dumped in the wilderness. Her lower body was badly torn. She was covered in bruises and her legs were covered in blood. It's hard to imagine the inhumanity of this cruel devil to torture his daughter like this. At this point, Mel hated himself. His happy family had been torn apart. Although the murderer was quickly arrested, ironically, he was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. He had murdered countless girls before, but there was no evidence to support his case. He even showed no remorse and laughed at the reporters. Since the birth of his daughter, his wife has become depressed. How could Mel live with the devil still on the earth? He's determined to kill his enemy himself to make up for his anger, but the police must have the killer by now. To get his revenge, he must plan carefully. Mel, a doctor by profession, took advantage of his position. First, he drugged the police officers who was driving the car. When the police car slowly stopped, he pretended to be a passerby and came to his aid. Then he pulled out his doctor's license and pretended to help. Finally, he took the opportunity to drive away. By the time the police responded, the car was long gone. He dragged the killer to a remote suburb. He rented a house for a lot of money, for $50,000 a day. The landlord was satisfied. Then he knocked him out. Then, after setting up the cabin, he turns it into his very own torture chamber. First, he tied the scumbag's hands, then hung him up. Then he fixed him on a modified stretcher. The man begged and pleaded that he wasn't the murderer. And that was just the beginning. News of the prisoner's abduction spread quickly. The police came to Dr. Mayer's house, but his wife said she didn't know. At that moment, Dr. Mayer called to report that he was safe. His wife urged him to take it easy. "Our daughter is dead, but we can't have another." She couldn't afford to lose her husband again. The chief, who was eavesdropping, couldn't help but talk him down. The law will do him justice. He mustn't let his family get in the way. But his daughter was all Mel had. He replied sternly to the commissioner that it would only take 7 days. In 7 days, he'd kill the murderer, then he'd turn himself into the police. Before the police could trace Mel's location, the other end of the line hung up. The commissioner was anxious, but his men were helpless. Why would they want to save a monster who killed so many girls? On the other hand, the 7 days of revenge had begun. On the first day, Mel smashed the scum's knees and hung him up so high he couldn't stand. His screams lasted all day and all night, but Mel was in the throes of vengeance. The next day, he waited until the scum was exhausted. He woke him up with his urine. When he woke up, the scumbag was still in denial. Mel slowly stepped on a crushed knee. The whole torture chamber was filled with the howls of a pig. After listening to the ear-splitting screams, Mel hoisted him up again. Then he took out his shotgun and shot the scum several times. Scared out of his wits, he confessed to killing the girl. He said he'd go back to the police and confess. Mel wasn't stupid when it came to this pretense. He was going to be even more brutal in the coming days. On the third day, Mel didn't want the scum to die so early. First he fed him, then he took out a chain and lashed it down. The scum's body was split open. This punishment was worse than death for him. Then he hit him with another chain until the scum fainted. Mel's anger was so great that he couldn't stop. Compared to the death of his daughter, even if he had to beat him to a pulp, it wouldn't be enough. He slipped and fell and came to his senses. He couldn't let this man die early. Mel was kind enough to put him on a drip. The 4th day of revenge, his wife had a nervous breakdown and convinced Mel to stop. She said she was tortured, but this statement completely enraged Mel. So he went to the torture chamber. He took out the sword poison he had prepared. The difference between this poison and anesthesia is that it paralyzes the whole body, but the senses are still there. The scum of the earth were so scared, they begged for mercy. It's the way. He then took out his daughter's photo. He wanted her to see the scumbag get his comeuppance. Mel, a skilled doctor, knew what he could do to keep the scumbag alive, but in pain for the rest of his life. He looked at the photo with numb eyes and slowly cut off the scum's genitals. He slowly cut off the scum's genitals. The sensation was instantaneous, but he couldn't fight it. He had to endure it. On the 5th day, Mel made soup from his genitals. He thoughtfully brought it to the scumbag. Although he was dying, he refused to drink it, and with what little strength he had left, He warned Mel to do whatever he wanted to do. He'd keep pushing him with his words. No doubt he wanted a quick death. The doctor with a heart of gold had become a murderer. He didn't feel good about it either, but with the way things were going, he had no choice. Mel squeezed the scumbag's neck. He suddenly realized he'd been duped and let go of his hand. He had to stick to his plan of revenge. He couldn't let him die like that. By day 6, Mel came to the gas station to buy a new tool of punishment, but is recognized by the pretty clerk. She supports Mel and then says she won't call the police. The clerk's support certainly made Mel realize he was doing the right thing. The parents of the other 2 victims were also very supportive. Only one, a single mother, expressed her disapproval. Her pain was over, and the murderer didn't exist in her mind. No matter what she did, her child would never come back. Mel laughed, so he snuck into the woman's house that night, and then he knocked out the woman he thought was unworthy of being a mother. When she woke up a long time later, she recognized Mel. He wanted the woman to see for herself. He wanted her to see with her own eyes that the murderer who brutalized her child did not exist. The blood on the floor. The horrible scum. The woman is terrified. Mel hands her a hammer to force her to avenge her daughter's death, but the paranoid woman insisted that time would erase everything and says that if he kills this scumbag, his daughter will be tortured and killed all over again. Then she started cursing him for being the devil. She'd barely forgotten the pain, and he was making her remember it again. Furious, Mel punched him in the face. Then the woman was left on the street. The first thing she does when she wakes up is call the police. The police got the license plate number of the car and found the location of the cabin. All the police immediately went out to arrest Mel, to rescue the scum of the earth. The day of this ridiculous arrest was Mel's daughter's birthday. It was also the last day of revenge. In a trance, he saw his daughter return, holding his daughter's hand. He slowly walked into the bathroom to help her wash away the dirt of this world, let her leave this world properly. But the wounds all over his daughter's body cut him to the core. He carefully wiped away the blood, but then her blood came out again. Mel was devastated. There was nothing a father could do. He went back to the torture chamber and unshackled the scum. He tried to end it all by swallowing the gun, but by then the police had surrounded the place. After a moment of silence, Mel walked out quietly. He'd gotten his revenge, but the pain in his heart was too much. The scum of the earth, even if he lived, would spend the rest of his life in agony in the face of the media's skepticism. He had no regrets, even if he had to do it all over again. He swears he'll do it even worse. Only by being worse than the scum can he avenge his daughter's death. This is a serious work of great human tension. Underneath a main line of classic ethical paradoxes, the movie has 2 distinct personality trajectories of the doctor and the psychopath. In the second half of the movie, the line between the doctor who saves lives and the psychopathic killer begins to blur. Everyone can become an out-of-control and psychopathic executioner. In addition, the inner struggles and pain of the many supporting characters are equally real and palpable. In terms of script and performance, this is a near-perfect drama. There is no absolute justice in this world, which is why the law reigns supreme. Despite what I believe, it's still hard to let go of it when I think back to the families who lost their children due to the injuries, whose anger and despair should they seek to liquidate. The law can't give answers. It can only help us forget. This is the fundamental cause of Kent's contempt for the law.